All right, we are live, Paul.
All right, cool. Welcome everybody to another episode of our live Q&A every Friday. And for those of you that might be joining us kind of new or watching this recorded, realize this is 100% live. We don't do any
That's right.
editing. We don't do even any bleeps. So if we accidentally drop a four-letter word, I apologize. We're just kind of shooting from the hip.
Flying at the seat of our pants.
Flying at the seat of our pants. Just, living on the edge and answering some questions that are frequently asked of us. Whether it be the stuff that we get over social and phone calls, in person, and sometimes live that people post right, on our Twitter page as we're doing this, live Q&A. And so this is an opportunity to connect with the industry, our users, people who might be looking at us as partners or other users, and just give an understanding of what is both our take on the industry as well as an understanding of what we're doing. So feel free to post kind of anything above and beyond just Edge, but also just cryptocurrency in general, and ask us whatever you'd like.
That's right. We are available on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. If you look up Edge or Edge Wallet, we're pretty easy to find, and we do monitor each of those channels. So if you do have questions or comments, like Paul said, we'd love to hear from our users and even our potential users.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Let's get started, shall we?
Yeah, sure. So one of the questions we got scribbled down for through the course of the week was, there's been a lot of talk about Digibyte. I mean, they've been pretty active in community, Twitter and whatnot, getting support from a few different wallets. But one question, not regarding just support of Digibyte, was one of the technologies that they've built out and are promoting, this thing called, I think, DigiID.
DigiID.
DigiID, and it, if you look at some of the demos of DigiID, it shows kind of the scanning of a barcode to log into a website, and a lot of people compare that to Edge and our Edge login.
Right.
And they're like, well, what exactly is the difference? And it goes to the advantage and disadvantage of either one. And from my cursory look at DigiID, it is what I consider to be a really, really good way to use public and private keys. It's not necessarily unique. It's existed before. And a different protocol implementation of that we've actually supported in our old app, Airbits, called BitID.
Right.
And the BitID protocol was actually developed by the Ledger folks.
Okay.
The hardware wallet Ledger. And I really liked it because it took the use of public and private keys and applied it in a different way. So it allows us to register with a service, say a website, and instead of registering a password, you register a public key or a public address.
Right.
And then now, instead of logging in with a username and password, you log in with a digital signature. And the website can verify your digital signature by just comparing that with the public key,
right,
that you've registered with them beforehand. And this is exactly what technologists and DevOps people do today when they log into web servers.
Right.
Command line, typing on the computer to log in, they use what's called SSH. And they're using private key tech to authenticate. And the beauty of this way of authenticating is that if a server gets compromised that you have an account on, the only thing that the attacker gets is a public key.
Right.
Well, it's
not
called
the private key.
They don't get the private key.
Right.
And so, it's called public for a reason. You don't really care if other people see it. In contrast, when someone gets access to a website, some old PHP forum that happens to have your password on it, well, now they could potentially use that password on another site if your passwords are similar.
Which most people's are.
For a lot of people, it
Right.
may be that way. And so public-private key authentication is a great method for authentication once you've gotten a way to secure a private key.
Right.
Which admittedly has been hard for decades until crypto came around and made that a bit easier. So BitID was a protocol we supported in Airbits. You use it actually to log in to crack in to buy Bitcoin inside of the app. We'll be adding that into Edge. And to my understanding, that's pretty much what DigiID is. It might be just a few tweaks. I don't know if it's compatible with BitID. But it's a very interesting protocol. Hats off to them if they're able to get more people to adopt it. It's better than your conventional login mechanism. But the difference, that's the question we got, is what's the difference between that and Edge login? Edge login is not really logging into a server.
Right.
It's actually sharing encrypted data with another decentralized application. So when you use Edge login to log into, say, Augur, what you're doing is you are communicating with Augur, having it create your Ethereum wallet private key for Ether and rep tokens, and then it's encrypting it and then backing it up inside the account you already have inside of Edge. So it's actually encrypted data sharing. It's not just signing a message.
Right.
And that's the fundamental difference. With a DigiID or BitID, you have to log into a web server. With Edge login, you're sharing and backing up a private key with a dApp.
Right, and usually, so I'm curious then, when you're using something like BitID or DigiID, does that mean that where is the actual private data stored when it's unencrypted, I guess.
Well, it just depends what wallet you're using. So with
Okay.
BitID, there were several wallets that implemented BitID. I think there was a fork of the Schildbach Android wallet that some people built out that supported, and then the private key is your Bitcoin private key. It's just that it's derived differently, and a different public address is created that's registered with a website. And you can think of the website as effectively being kind of like a blockchain. When you spend money on a blockchain, you are signing a message, kind of
Right.
like a check, saying, "I own that money. Please send it." When you're logging in with DigiID or BitID, you are signing a message saying, "I am who I am. Please let me get access to the
Right.
server." And that's what these protocols enable you to do, is authenticate to a server. Edge login isn't really like authentication. It is encrypted data sharing between one application and another. One of those applications being Edge Wallet.
Have we gone over some of the characteristics of Digibyte?
I don't know that we've gone over in detail. We're looking at the currency. We don't
Okay.
support Digibyte right now inside
Right,
of
right,
Edge. The things that I've heard that stand out are definitely like faster transaction times. What they're hoping are more scalable throughput and transaction volumes, but I don't know that they've implemented anything specifically unique for transaction scalability, other than allowing more transactions to go into the network.
Right.
As far as scaling the storage and the bandwidth and whatnot, I don't know that they've implemented anything specific in that regard.
Yeah, I think we did a poll on Twitter. I don't know if we've gone over the poll results before. Did we go over last week? Do you know?
Last week we went over a poll. I don't know if we have had a new one since then. But
Well, it was the one about which coins we should add next, and Digibyte came in first with
Got it.
37%.
Got it. Okay, I think we did talk about that one last week. And so, like I said,
Oh,
we are
excuse me,
actively
second place.
Came in second?
Decred was
Decred came in
first.
first. Yeah, we love those guys at Decred. But I think we covered that poll.
Okay.
Talked a little bit about some of the challenges of the different coins, but we are actively looking at most everything on that list.
Yeah,
so you should see
absolutely.
some announcements, in the next few weeks and months about added coin support inside of Edge.
Yep.
On that topic, though, you asked like what's different about Digibyte
Right.
and scaling. A question we get is like, what are the alternatives to scale blockchains? And this could easily be not a 30-minute Q&A, but this could be a 30-hour, slugfest. But let's try to distill it into maybe like 5-6 minutes.
Right.
What's your take on the alternatives to scale blockchains?
Yeah,
And what
so-
excites you?
What excites me? Oh, man. So far, it seems like I can more or less categorize them into three different classifications. The first is something like on-chain scaling, which is essentially what Bitcoin, I'll call it Bitcoin Core. Some people call it Bitcoin. What they were doing from the beginning, where, how would I say, if they want to do on-chain scaling, they do have the option to increase the block size. And by having a larger block size, every 10 minutes a block is mined, they can fit more transactions into that block. Obviously, that's something that more or less scales proportionally, depending on how many transactions you have. There are things you can do to make it a little bit more lightweight. Something like SegWit helps with something like that. But yeah, essentially, so Bitcoin Cash has gone the way of on-chain scaling, where they have already increased the block size. I don't remember if it's 8 megabytes or more. So that's one solution. The next is what they call like a second layer solution, and that is what some of the people at Blockstream and Lightning Labs are working on with Bitcoin. And there's some other cryptocurrencies that are also looking to adopt that. I know Ethereum's looking at it, as well as Litecoin. A lot of the cryptocurrency blockchains are looking at it, because it kind of doesn't matter which cryptocurrency you are. If you're doing things the traditional, almost like taking Bitcoin as a template, if you're doing it that way, you are going to need some sort of extra scaling solution. So yeah, with something like Lightning Network, essentially more or less what you're doing is you're creating a cryptographically secure, or trying to create a cryptographically secure, you can almost say it's like, how would I say it? It's like keeping a tab, where maybe you and your friend are out eating, you're at a restaurant or you're at a bar, and you don't always, you don't always transact the money for every drink that you buy for your buddy and vice versa. What you do is you wait until it's a convenient time for you to settle, right? So that's the big term, is settlement. So with something like Bitcoin on Lightning Network, eventually once you've done enough of the tabulation and the back and forth, eventually you're going to want to settle on chain. So the idea is to essentially fund a channel where you can do something like that. And then essentially when you are at the point where you're comfortable settling, then you will actually do that. Of course, that does beg the question of, if the block size is not getting increased, then when you eventually do settle on the main blockchain, Of course, there's the big question of, okay, well, how much of a fee are you going to pay? Because that's kind of what at least that's one of the big factors is people dealing with fees. Everyone's trying to keep fees as low as they can, keep things as frictionless as possible, especially for people that are unbanked or in the third world. If they're paying 25-cent fees, it might not be much for someone who's in the United States, but if you're in Africa or some of the poor regions, that could be quite a bit of money. And the third classification is kind of a more open-ended one. The main example that comes to mind with that is something like, how would I say it, like Nano, formerly Ryblox. What they do is they do some sort of proof of work. I honestly, I can't even go into too much detail about it because it is a little bit confusing. We did do a podcast episode on it once where they're doing it a completely different way. I think it's pretty innovative what they're doing. I would like to see Nano integrated into Edge Wallet at some point, but obviously there are a lot of cryptocurrencies at this point that need to get integrated, and we have plenty of work to do if we're going to try to get them all in. But I think being able to finally get it into my hands and see how something like Nano would work as with regards to scaling it would be interesting. The easiest way to find out how something works is to actually use it, right, Paul?
To actually use it, although the challenge with scaling is that many technologies are right now in theory, because even if you've deployed it in the real world, you don't know how well it scales until it actually gets that amount of throughput.
That amount of people.
And it's different to push a lot of throughput through a deployed idea when you're just throwing a bunch of tests at it, as opposed to the real world actually using it. Once you have the real world actually using it and multiple independent parties aren't just throwing dust at it, we're actually putting a significant amount of value onto that chain and transferring significant amount of value, and now you have an actual reason why people might want to attack your scaling mechanism. Because sometimes there's the trade-off between scaling and security. So that's when you really put it to the test. You really put things like large blocks to test. You really put things like Lightning to the test. Like, it's in theory good, and you can even push literally tons of transactions through it and think that it's good, but it's not really tested until people put real world value and have multiple independent parties that are at risk with large funds, that you've really put the scaling to the test. But I'm open to people trying. One of the thoughts that I have about scaling is I try to, a lot of people just say scaling. They just throw that word as the problem of blockchains, but they don't identify what are the key issues it's trying to solve. Like first, okay, well, what is the actual problem that you're trying to solve with scaling? And so I try to break it down to a handful of things, and then try to see what are some solutions people are proposing. So in the process of thinking about scaling, well, when you send a transaction, it requires bandwidth, right? It requires network bandwidth for you to send that transaction. It requires bandwidth for it to propagate across the network. It requires storage. So you got to store the transactions.
Right.
In order for you to validate them, at least when they're on chain, they do have to be stored. They don't necessarily have to be stored for some off-chain solutions like Lightning. And then you also have compute power. Like you've got to process this thing. You've got to actually, when you process a big block, which has a lot of transactions, it requires heavyweight CPU. So there's that aspect of scaling. And then a big one that a lot of people talk about is also speed of verification of a transaction. So even if I had to store all the transactions in the world and it cost me a ton of CPU power and a ton of bandwidth, well, how quickly can I get or receive a transaction and know that I've received the money? That's an aspect of scaling as well.
Right.
Like how can I scale the performance? Like I receive the money in point something seconds and I know it's mine.
Yeah, and it is
versus 10 minutes versus 5 versus 2 versus 15 versus 30. And some projects are targeting just that piece of scaling, I guess. If you call it scaling, is how do I get a fast transaction?
That you can be sure that it's yours.
Sure, it's yours. And so one of the projects, I'll just speak of one because you mentioned a bunch of different ones. I'm going to speak of one that I'm excited about, which doesn't have a coin, is not deployed in the wild to the best of my knowledge. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. It is the NG project, the Bitcoin NG project.
Okay.
And that one basically takes the order of the way you mine and inverts it. So the order that we mine is we collect transactions and then we mine them and then you get a reward. So think about that order. Transactions, mine a block, reward. 1, 2, 3. In Bitcoin NG, you first mine a block, and then you get the reward, and then you confirm the transactions.
So does that mean you have to mine the block if you? Sorry.
So if you think about what mining a block is, it's solving a puzzle.
Right.
So really, when you're mining a block, you're not really mining a block. You're just solving the puzzle, and you're publishing the proof that you solved the puzzle.
Right.
That puzzle doesn't have any transactions in it. You just solved the puzzle. That's all it is. And then now, once you've solved the puzzle, you now have a golden ticket. And that magic wand golden ticket allows you to now confirm transactions very quickly. So as soon as a transaction comes in, since you have the golden ticket, you tap it with your magic wand, and suddenly it's confirmed. And because people know that you have the golden ticket, that once you've tapped the transaction, with your magic wand, they say, "Yep, it's confirmed.
So
I trust that this will not get double spent." And as a miner, you are motivated to only tap on the transactions that are valid, that are not double spends or basically breaking of consensus. Because if you confirm an invalid transaction, someone in the future can publish a proof that you did so, and you would lose your reward.
Right.
So it's inverting this order where I am already rewarded, and I want to make sure not to lose it.
Right.
Versus I'm going to mine transactions hoping that I get a reward.
Right.
Which in that case,
wait 100 confirmations or whatever.
Exactly. And so we don't know who is going to get the reward, and so we have to get the transactions to everybody. And then only once someone gets the reward is that transaction then confirmed. And so this way, we effectively invert that order. And so I'm excited about that project because I haven't, mentally been able to poke really any holes in it. Once again, only in widespread deployment will we see if that works. But I'd be excited to see this if this is deployed as an extra blockchain. So be it. If it's deployed as a fork to an existing blockchain, like Bitcoin Cash and whatnot. It was presented at a Cash conference in Tokyo.
Right.
And I'd heard about it even before then, even before Cash existed, when it was just Bitcoin. I'd heard about the proposal, and it was fascinating to me. So that's one that I would like to keep my eye on and hear about, but I don't hear too much about it. But the idea is fascinating. Once again, it doesn't solve the scalability of storage, of compute, or of bandwidth. Right?
But it does help with the certainty.
Certainty. And if you
and
think
the
about
speed of certainty.
And if you think about what they promote in Lightning, it's all the above.
Right.
Right. It's you don't have to store the transactions. The bandwidth goes down, and you are certain very quickly.
Right.
Well, let's target one of those at a time and see what other solutions there are. Well, this one is a solution for the certainty part.
Right.
So the speed of the transaction, even if everything else stays the same, and maybe there's other solutions to help solve, the storage, bandwidth, and compute.
Yeah, it is funny that you mentioned there are a lot of projects that will tout how low their fees are, but unless it's really getting, if there's not much of a stress test, they're not getting many transactions, then yeah, okay, your fees are going to be really low. So that's not really, it's like a marketing tactic, if I'm being honest. But it is interesting that you mentioned the certainty of transactions because on one hand, and I am curious, so Bitcoin has 10-minute block times. Do you think that's an appropriate amount for block time? I used to think that was really long, but if it's lower, you can end up with these orphaned blocks where you think you have a confirmation, and it turns out you actually don't. So do you think 10 minutes is like an appropriate time period?
It's either, the funny is you either have time or size, and it doesn't matter how you slide it. So it's either you've got, if you cut the block time in half, that's the equivalent of doubling the block size. And it's almost exactly. And the breaking point is when your block time is so short that the time to propagate the block is equal to or close to the block time.
Right.
Because then you never actually converge, like your consensus never converges. That is one of the biggest topics of kind of research.
Right.
Is how do we solve that problem where if we have a really large block and then we shoot it out and it propagates across the network, but if it takes 9 minutes to propagate and it's a 10-minute block time.
You have to download it and stuff.
Yeah. And so if you cut the time in half, then you have less time to propagate, but typically speaking, maybe the block size would end up becoming half the size with the same amount of transactions.
Right.
So it being half the size means it propagates somewhat faster, right?
Right.
Not quite 2x, but close to 2x faster. And there are a few other projects out there that are looking to solve that specific issue of block time propagation. And once again, realize that was one thing I liked about the NG aspect is that you don't really have the block time propagation issue.
Right.
The thing you're propagating is the proof. So as a miner, you propagate the fact that you found this proof.
Right.
And then after that, you are tapping transactions.
Okay.
Saying I'm the one that got the transaction.
So I am curious real quick. The more I think about confirmations and the scaling debate, I'm thinking about, okay, so one of the big, how would I say it, the big demographics that cryptocurrency is trying to go after is point of sale. And people are talking about, well, confirmation times take 10 minutes. I'm curious, and I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot. If you were doing a point of sale store, let's say your average item or merchandise was maybe like $50 or something like that, would you be comfortable with people sending Bitcoin and just waiting until you have it show up on the network?
Funny, this is kind of a social question.
Right.
Because if I'm accepting Bitcoin, I probably at this point have some kind of belief in the crypto.
Right.
And whatnot. And almost certainly in kind of today's day and age, the people that would even bother spending their Bitcoin to you don't have an ideological desire to steal from the merchant.
Right.
So I'd probably accept it with some basic, what point of sale systems do is do basic analysis of the transaction as, what are the odds of it confirming?
Right.
Simple bit. Obviously, that's not a guarantee. Especially on Bitcoin, it's not a guarantee.
So like looking at the fee is part of that,
is
are you
the
saying?
fee Is the fee big enough? Does it have RBF attached to it?
Okay.
If it has RBF attached to it, then no.
Right.
I don't accept it as a payment at all
Yeah.
because I instantly know that thing can get ripped out from underneath me really quickly. But I think it's a very stopgap, nuanced, just kind of I don't call it gimmicky. It's just kind of a fun toy to play with.
Right.
From the viewpoint of merchant point of sale, physical, with Bitcoin specifically.
Right.
Once you start talking about other chains that have not in a long time hit their capacity limit,
Right.
and that don't have RBF on there, then it becomes pretty realistic. Like,
Right.
yeah, sure, it's possible, but the same sense it's possible for me to get a credit card charge back.
Right.
And so really it's odds. You're always taking
Yeah.
some kind of a risk. I would feel far more comfortable taking an unconfirmed transaction on several other networks that are not, that are not close to being clogged up with a small amount of fee estimate kind of, determination.
Right.
Than I would credit card transaction.
Yeah.
I've worked in small
Oh yeah,
business.
definitely more than a credit card.
Yeah, I've worked in small business. I actually worked at a bar nightclub. I saw all the fraud that we got, and how hard it is to prevent.
Yeah,
And we
especially when
incur all that fee.
when your profit margins are
Yeah.
only single digit
Total
percentage.
single digit. And
Yeah.
so it's just a risk reward ratio. And so obviously with Bitcoin, when blocks get full, I wouldn't take it at all because the odds are so high that
You'll be waiting
I
forever anyway.
I'd wait for
yeah.
confirmation for giving out anything.
Yeah.
And it would need something else like Lightning or whatnot before I would take a payment quickly. With the other currencies in their current state, admittedly, that might not be the case in 3 years, right? But with many other currencies, Dash, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, with a little bit of analysis of the fee that they had sent, I would take a 50, even couple $100 payment.
Right.
Yeah, I guess like I
Yeah, and
said.
if it's something where it's $5,000 payment, just ask them to wait for one confirmation,
Yeah.
two confirmations. But most stores are not doing purchases of that size. 99% of them are not.
I do think Dash has an interesting model to be able to solve that problem with Instant Send.
Instant send. Yeah.
So Instant Send is a compelling tech for us to be able to do occasional, quick, fast payments. Like you can't do them very repeatedly inside of the wallet, but admittedly, how often do you wipe out your credit card to go and actually do a payment? Right? Not super often. And with Instant Send, you can do one pretty much guaranteed once every 20 minutes.
Right.
I think it needs about 10 confirmations. Like the funds in your wallet have to have about 10 confirmations, and Dash's confirmations are like 2 minutes.
Right.
I could be wrong about the 10. It could be 6 or 10. I can't remember. But we're not typically as humans making that frequent of payments.
Right. Definitely.
So pretty
not.
much any one payment that you might whip out your phone for will be able to be an instant send. So I like that they put thought into the true usage case of crypto from a kind of point of sale merchant consumer point of view.
I feel like, we're kind of on a path here. I am curious. In your opinion, what would Edge have to implement as feature-wise, and if we wanted Edge Wallet to be used as a point of sale?
Point of sale, a lot of it's just user experience. So if you've ever worked at a small business and used a point of sale, you'll notice it feels different than using something like a PayPal wallet. So one small nugget that, as an example, this is just one example, when merchants enter an amount to collect,
Right.
they never have a decimal point anywhere. There is no decimal point on the number pad of a merchant's point of sale.
I don't get it. How
Ever.
do they do it then?
All you do is you assume you have to enter the cents. If I want to collect $20 from you, I put
2000.
2000 always. So you don't know how many times I've gone to a merchant that's using a crypto wallet,
Oh
and
my.
they put 2000,
And you're like,
and then try to collect
"No."
$2,000 from someone.
Yeah.
And I'll tell a little true story. Is there's a merchant here in San Diego, that makes awesome tacos, and they were taking Bitcoin for a while.
Right.
And we had a staff member pay $700 for a couple
Oh my.
tacos.
On accident? Did they give
On
a...
accident. No, they totally gave it back. We knew the owner and whatnot. But realize that it's those tiny little user experience changes that are different on the merchant side than on the user side. And so being able to have an app that knows what is kind of the normal user flow for merchants, things like that. And, being able to, obviously with a wallet, you're showing the entire balance typically. So having one that doesn't have the balance of the wallet, maybe only having the public keys on there, not necessarily the private keys, easy access to get into it. I think I forgot what it's called, All Pay. I know the Dash guys are really close to a point of sale provider, a point of sale application that's used all throughout like New Hampshire. I think it's called All Pay. I'm almost embarrassed I can't remember the exact name, but their app is super simple, and that's what merchants want. They don't want a lot of buttons. They don't want a lot of things going on. It's just like, let me enter an amount and collect a payment and tell me when the payment's done, and then go back and collect another payment.
Got it.
And so that, I think, is what it kind of takes. We had a bit of a merchant mode inside of Airbits because some merchants just wanted to use us that had a few of those tweaks, but admittedly, it's kind of a halfway. Like if you want a true merchant app, number one, it shouldn't even be a crypto-only app. It should encompass the entire needs of your company. It's got to be the way you collect credit card, the way you collect cash, and the way you collect crypto, and it has your inventory all in there. So
does that mean it'd be more likely that Edge would get integrated into an app that's already point of sale?
Yeah, I think exactly. Okay. So I would say you integrate your wallet into the app that's already point of sale. You like maybe scan a barcode, and suddenly the Edge public keys for your cryptos get sent over into this point of sale app, and now it's able to collect money for you, but the money actually goes inside of your Edge wallet. I could see that happening in the future.
Okay.
Yep. Cool. See here, some other questions, getting off the whole scaling and blah, blah, blah.
It was supposed to be 5 minutes, but...
Yeah, I know. So I said it's going to easily become 30 hours, right?
The scaling episode.
Yeah. So we got a question on 2FA. And this is a fascinating one because we implement 2FA in the wallet. And the question is, like, well, how does our 2FA work? Because it is very different. I don't know if you kind of fielded this question from anyone out in your friends.
A little bit.
Of the 100 people you've installed Edge on?
Our QA guys are a little bit better at this. I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, so the two-factor, I guess I should rewind. What is 2FA? Two-factor authentication. Rewind even further. What's it for? Right? What's the point? Well, if you're authenticating with a service, say with like a username and password, if, like we had mentioned, someone got access to your password, then they could access your multiple services with it. Right. Two-factor makes it where there's a second factor, not just a password or something else. Typically, it's defined as something you are or something you have.
Right.
So something you are, well, a thumbprint is something you are. Something you have could be your device, your phone. And if they don't have your phone, then they can't log into your account. So a lot of two-factor implements the something you have by sending you an SMS to your phone. Right, like only you have. So that's
your phone number, yeah.
Right, and that's one form of two-factor. Then there's Google Authenticator, which puts a token on your phone, and only your phone has that token.
Right.
And that's shared with the server, so the server can tell who you are.
Yeah,
so
if you ever lose your phone, man, getting Google 2FA or Google Authenticator set back up, man, that's like a week-long process.
Yeah, and that's fair because they want to make sure that you're not getting frauded, like someone else isn't guessing your password.
Right.
So the way Edge 2FA works is we basically take Google Authenticator, the protocol that is implemented by Google Authenticator, and it's not actually specific to Google. It's an RFC standard protocol, and we bake it into the app. It's built into Edge. So it's almost like you had Edge and you had Google Authenticator both on your phone, and when you wanted to log into Edge, you would have to go to Google Authenticator and find your Edge in the 6 digits. It's changing every 30 seconds, and copy it, and then go away from Google Authenticator, go back to Edge and paste it, and then log in. That all happens in one. It's like we took the two apps and then we slammed them together, and the copying and pasting is happening in the background for you.
So you said RFC. What is that?
RFC is a request for comment.
Okay. Yeah, for like proposals.
They're like for proposals.
Right.
And so that's that was where the proposal for this method of two-factor was proposed and pretty much widely adopted.
Right.
And Google Authenticator is the most common app that people know of that implements that standard.
Right.
And we implemented it as well inside of Edge specifically for our users. You never see the code. You never see that 6 digits change. You never have to register it. You just push one button. That's why we call it one-touch 2FA. You push a button, it generates this unique token that's saved on your device. It shares it with the server, and then it hashes it and changes it every 30 seconds every time you want to log in.
Huh.
And so that's the unique piece of what we do. We believe in 2FA. We know that it's an important piece of security technology, but I've always hated using it. I've always hated using it. And this is, this was it was birthed out of a long ride I had, I think, with William, one of the co-founders and our chief architect, trying to figure out how to do 2FA in a good way. And so this is what came out of it, and we're really happy with it. I have it on all my accounts with Edge, and I forget that it's even on
Yeah.
because it's just invisible.
So why do you think that some of the other applications don't use that same RFC functionality so that you don't have to swipe over to Google Authenticator?
Because they're just used to saying, well, that's how everyone else does it.
Yeah.
You know, like,
bleeding
okay.
edge.
Yeah, everyone else does it like, oh, let's just register 2FA with the email. Let's just register it with an SMS. Let's just register with Google Authenticator. And so they just kind of do the norm. And what is this whole industry about? It's like, well, let's take what everyone's doing as the norm and say, well, F that, and we're going to figure out a better way.
Right.
Crypto's figuring out a better way for money. Edge is figuring out a better way for security, right? And we'll think out of the box. And so one of the common questions I get about us, and admittedly, is like, okay, well, oh, cool, you guys are a security company. What have you guys done before? Have you worked at RSA, blah, blah, blah. Like, what is our background in security? You know, how do we go deep? We're actually relatively new to it.
Yeah.
But because of that, we think in ways that other people
Outside the box.
completely don't think of. We completely think outside of the box. Like, was Bitcoin invented by someone that works at a bank?
I
No.
have no idea.
No, I feel fairly comfortable thinking that it wasn't, right?
Right.
So I take a quote from, I think it was Steve Jurvetson. So he's one of the kind of prime partners at Draper, Fisher, Jurvetson, DFJ, one
Okay.
of the biggest VCs in the world. And he was on stage at a conference I went to, and he said, disruptive technology is never invented by someone in the industry of that technology. So disruptive fintech is not going to be invented by the banks.
By fintech, right.
They're never going to innovate your own industry, right? If you're an established large player in an industry, you're not going to be the innovator in that industry. So his statement was, Google will never innovate search. They already did.
Yeah.
Become the behemoth in it. They'll never innovate search. They might innovate other industries, like automobile, self-driving cars, blah, blah, but they're not going to innovate search in the same sense that a car company is not going to innovate the car.
Right.
Like Tesla was not a car company. You know, who asked Elon Musk, well, what's your history building cars? Did you work at Ford?
What was he?
No.
Mostly just batteries
He
or
was-
something?
he was
He was
PayPal.
PayPal.
He was PayPal.
Right.
And when he built PayPal, who asked him, what's your experience doing
With the
financial
banks, yeah.
services? Nothing.
Yeah.
And so that's where we come at this. We want to take a completely fresh look at the way we secure data and how to make it both simple, secure, invisible to the end user, which is, I think, our strength. We come at it from a completely different view. And, you know, when we enter a lot of these like kind of cybersecurity talks, all of them are very kind of traditional, like, oh, let's shield your network and malware detection, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, that's good. Those are important.
Yeah.
We use some of those things, but let's apply something completely out of the box. That no
Something
one's doing.
new.
Something completely new, and it's motivated by crypto, which is something new as well.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it is when you're in an industry that is new, that's already bleeding edge like cryptocurrency is, you're gonna kind of be used to thinking outside of the box and being bold because that is, how would I say, that is the nature of the industry in general. You're already out in the uncharted territory, so to speak.
You're forced to.
And your users, to a certain extent, they know that you are pushing the envelope. But of course, you still have to be careful. This is people's money, so that's why we do diligent testing at Edge.
Yeah. So we obviously have to be careful. We do ask feedback and opinion on what we do. We get some audits on our architecture, but at the same time, it's not going to be what people have seen before, and it's built by people who are thinking differently. So that's us. Well, cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. There goes another Friday live Q&A. Went a few minutes over, but we're always starting a few minutes late. So I guess that's kind of
that's right.
That's kind of the style, making sure we get all set up nicely. So tune in again next week. I'm not sure what we're going to have next week. Maybe we'll bring in someone special, maybe someone new.
Yeah, it'd be nice. We have some team members who we want to get them on.
Shy.
I know you guys are watching. Yeah, they're a little camera shy, so we're going to try to nudge them. I'll get Paul to order them. It's
I can never crank that. Be in front of the cameras, I can never demand of somebody, except for Jessica. I can demand that she gets it.
There you go. Yeah, Friday, noon every Friday. We are live here, so get your questions and comments ready, and we will go through them and have some fun.
Yeah, and if you want to see and have questions answered, anything on the lines of like accounting and HR and whatnot, go ahead and send us a tweet and tell us that you want to see Painful Human on.
That's right.
Okay? All right. See you guys later.
See ya.